Welcome back, everybody. I think that I would like to, even though there's an attraction to starting something, a new chapter, but I'd like to finish up the old chapter that we finished with a few weeks ago, because there are some important and practical, Maisidic observations that Rav Moshe makes that are worth seeing. But so we'll be starting on page Reish Chof Ches, in the middle of the previous chapter. Reish Chof Ches. So the subject of the Maimer Chov Dalid, we started on Reish Chof Vav. Remember, we were talking about the machlokas between Rabbi Yeshua and Rabbi Eliezer about whether the Geula is going to come automatically, memela, even without Jewish people doing tshuva, which is the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua, or Rabbi Eliezer said, no, we have to do tshuva, and the Gemara's conclusion was Ishtik Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer was silent. So from that, the Maral and the others are medayik that the halach is like Rabbi Yeshua, that there will be a geula even without tshuva. We're on page Reish Chof Ches for those of you joining us. Okay. So that was the subject of this thing, and the question is, what do we do to bring Mashiach, or should we be doing things to bring Mashiach? And Rabbi Moshe made a clear distinction between it's certainly to do things which are clearly mitzvos, like settling the land. So those are things which we know that the Talmidim of the Gra, the Talmidim of the Baal Shem Tov, were actively involved in those mitzvahs, and with the kavana that this would bring the geula closer. So there's nothing wrong with trying to emphasize certain areas of the Torah, certain mitzvahs of the Torah, which we see as being furthering the process of the geula, or bringing about the process of the geula. Right? But Moshe says, to do mitzvahs, which to put on tefillin so the Mashiach will come. That's not something that we do. Right? But to do activities which directly will impact on the process, so that we can do, and those are the things that we do. So then on page Reish Chof Ches, I don't remember if we started this or we didn't start this, but he talks about several practical examples of things that people did during the course of the generations, which were explicitly intended to bring about the geula, to facilitate the coming of the geula. And the one that he relates to in the most detail is the Chiddush HaSmicha. Did we start this chapter, this section? Anybody remember? No, we didn't start this. Okay, so the Chiddush HaSmicha. So this took place in the year 1538, right, Berach? Right, and I think we talked about it. There was a big machlokas between the Rabbanim of Tzfat and the Rabbanim of Yerushalayim about whether it would be a good idea to reinstate the smicha, meaning the original smicha, which the chain, which was ish mi pi ish from Moshe Rabbeinu, but somewhere in the end of the end of the period of the beginning of the period of the Amoraim, it came to an end, and there was no further smicha. But according to the Shita of the Rambam, there was an opinion in the Rambam who said that the Rambam says that if all of Chachmei Eretz Yisrael would get together and create a smicha, would give smicha to certain individuals, so that would be a reinstatement of the original smicha. We would have smuchim, and if we have smuchim, so then we have all of the ability to do all of the things that we need smuchim for, to certain kinds of dinei Torah, which are only b'smichim. We could give capital punishment. We could be mekadesh the chodesh. We can all do all kinds of things. And there was a very big machlokas at the time, as I mentioned, Rabbi Yosef Karo himself, the Beis Yosef, received smicha, right, from Rabbi Yaakov Beirav, right? And the Rabbanim of Tzfat were very much into it, and the Rabbanim of Yerushalayim, Margar Albach, and who was a leader of them, their leader, he was very much against it. So at the end of the day, it didn't last very long. There was such a movement, and there were a number of people who did receive smicha, but it fizzled out and did not have a continuity. And the Moshe brings this as an example. So let's see what he says here. Chidush ha-smicha. Dinei ha-Torah tluyim b'smicha. Many dinim of the Torah depend on smicha. Ubemet otam hadvarim haya efshar lomar. What we've said above is that, like for instance, doing things like settling the land and things like that, which are legitimate. We could have said this gamal anisayon lechadesh et hasmicha b'tzfat, by the attempt to renew smicha in Tzfat. Sharei rabim midinei Torah tluyim b'smicha. Many dinei Torah, right, require smicha. Umeikar adin tzrichim gimel smuchim gamul dinei mominus. We need 3 smuchim for monetary matters. The gimel Elohim ksiv b'parsha, because the pasuk says the word Elohim 3 times, Elohim 3 times, which is which from this the Chazal darshan that we need. Elohim is the Beis Din, is a title for the smuchim. It's a reference to the smuchim, right? V'yesh mimishpatei haTorah shemachmas chisaron hasmicha lo danim b'hem klal. We don't do them at all. V'gam ma she'anachnu danim hayom gzelos v'chavolos, and then the Gemara says that even what we do judge today, for instance, matters of theft and personal injury, afilu gerus shezeh d'oraisa, and even the ability to actually convert people, non-Jews, into becoming Jews. The Gemara says that it's really, we don't have the authority to do so. However, it's as if the older authorities appointed us to be their shluchim, right? So we're like the shliach of the ones who had smicha. And so that's the concept of the Gemara, that shlichusayu kavdina. When we do it, we're actually, the power that we have is not our own power, but the authority comes from the earlier generations. Right? But this is not the case for when people admit to owing money or loans. There we don't need the smuchim, because shalotino delos they love it. Because if it would require smuchim, then nobody would ever lend money, because it would be impossible to recover it. So therefore, they made a takana that for everyday things like loans and things, so you don't need smuchim. But me'ikar adin, you need smuchim. Another what Moshe is saying is that we came. So now, if that would be the case, he's asking the question: why didn't? What was the reason? What was the rationale for not doing it? Right? If we could do it, so then it's a mitzvah to have. It's a mitzvah, right? These are mitzvahs to do, and if it's a mitzvah to do so, then we should do it, right? If we have the ability to do so, and then the Chachmei Tzfat understood, right? And they were talking about in the 1500s, right? Not very long after Golus Sfarad, after the being driven out of Spain, right, which in 1492. Here we're talking not 40, 50 years later, and there was as we know, a great concentration of Chachamim in Tzfat, and they decided that, listen, we're in Eretz Yisrael, and we have the ability to do this, and we should want to do it. And the question is, what happened? Okay, and so L'chora, he says, it's a mitzvah, and if it's a mitzvah, we should be doing this. So Moshe is going to try to put his finger on, and if you're wondering, right, he's going to also mention the idea of tchelet, of putting on tcheles on your tzitzis, right? You put on tcheles on your tzitzis. It's a mitzvah, right? It's a mitzvah. It's certainly explicitly written in the Torah that the best way, the optimal way to fulfill the mitzvah of tzitzis is with tcheles. Right? That's what it says in the Torah. We say that every day in Kriyat Shema, right? And so what happened? Right? Why is it that we don't fulfill these mitzvahs in the optimal ways, right, if we have the possibility of doing so? This is a question, right? But then he says, but getting back to our sugyas, if you look at the top of the page, Omnam b'michtevei Rabbi Rav, right, in his letters of Rabbi Rav, he was the one who was the big initiator of the smicha. Ha'atam ha'ikari atzlo haya zirus ha'geula. He wasn't focusing so much on the mitzvah of it, that we should be doing it, but it was the zeros. It was making the to start
Hastening.
the hastening. Thank you. The hastening of the Geula. Al derech masha kosu b'Rambam, as the pasuk says, right? V'she'apasuk omer v'yoshiva shoftecha v'rishona v'yosecha v'atchila, right? That HaKadosh Baruch Hu says it's part of the Geula process. I will restore your judges kevarishona v'yosecha v'atchila. Right, our tefillah, our Shmon Esrei is taken from this pasuk in Yeshaya. Shiva Shofteinu Gvarishon Yatzenek V'Atchila. Acharechen Yikari Lach Ir Hatzedek Kiryan Emona. You will be called the Ir Hatzedek, the city of justice. V'zem mechayev shetiach chidush smicha lefnei bias HaMashiach. And so he says, listen, if that's the case, so then this sounds like a prerequisite for the Bias HaMashiach. It says, Achrechein, after you have your judges are restored, so then you will be called the city of justice. So this was his main motivation. L'chein hu ishtadel shekach yeh. And therefore, he made every effort to start this because he was interested. And he says, right? He says, could be, you could argue that maybe he wanted to do it because he held like Rabbi Eliezer, who holds that the Geula has to come from us. But he says, we have much correspondence between the Rabbanim of Yerushalayim and the Rabbanim of Tzfat about whether it's a good idea or not. And they didn't bring up this machlokas, whether we paskin like Rabbi Elazar, we paskin like Rabbi Yeshua. It's mashma that it's a good idea to do that, even according to Rabbi Yeshua. Right? But these are positive, even according to Rabbi Yeshua, that we don't have to start the Geula process on ourselves, but to do things which fit in with it and will make it easier to happen, which will facilitate it. Those are something that's good. Right? Okay, so he talks about this. Okay, but let's see what he says here. Ubemet tzarich bir. So he said, Ubemet tzarich bir lama lo huskekol lechidash esmicha machmas achiv etluim b'zeh. He says, first of all, so they were talking about. There's two aspects. There's the aspect of the halachic obligations. There's a halachic question, right? If we can, right, halachic question that we should be mechanish smicha in order to be able to have judges who are able to fulfill the obligations of what a judge has to do. And the other side is that besides being a halachic obligation, right, there is a halachic issue, right? There's another question of the effect it'll have on the facilitating and the hastening of the Geula. So he says, why didn't they focus on the halachic aspect? Right? He says, he says it's true that the whole possibility of being mechadish smicha, that's a chiddush to the Rambam. Right? The Rambam writes about this, that if all the Chachmei Yisrael get together, so then they'll be able to take the smicha, but it is something which is unique to the Rambam. Other Rishonim did not speak about this and did not give away their opinions about this. But Ella, right, shel b'chol ofen lo chashashu Chachmei Yisrael asot ma'aseh pizeh. That wasn't the motivation to paskin like the Rambam. V'gam l'maisa no'roim shelo al tabi yado l'chashash smicha, and l'maisa didn't work. Right? It wasn't successful. Im kol ha'mamatzim, with all of his efforts, v'miyot gedolei chachmei ador ito be'etza achas, and even though, right, the gedolim of the generation were together with Rabbi Yaakov Be'Rab in trying to make chashash smicha. Ume'az v'ad hayom lo nasa nisayon amiti l'chazor l'chashash smicha. Right, so right now Rav Moshe is focusing on what happened to the halachic issue. He says, okay, in other words, besides the fact that there is a question of a Geula issue, but he wants to explain to us, Rav Moshe wants to explain, how do we relate to this halachic issue? there is a possibility, at least according to the Rambam, and the Rambam is certainly creates is certainly enough to create a motivation to do it. At least maximum. Okay, we have this issue, and so why wasn't this accepted? Why isn't this taken to be the davar pashut? If you could do it, let's do it. Right? So Rav Moshe is going to tell a very important yesod here. Okay, so this is the next paragraph. Let's pay attention. V'nira says Rav Moshe, shehatam ha'amiti lezehu. What's the true reason for this? Hu mipnei shekol inyan b'Torah shebichtav tzarich la'avor eleinu b'mahalchei Torah shebal peh. Okay.
Recording in progress.
Okay, is everybody with me here? I don't know what's happening on that. Okay, everybody. Okay. So, but let's read that. Let's read that sentence again, right? לזהו מפני שכל עניין בתורה שבכתב צריך לעבור אלינו במהלכי תורה שבעל פה. Right? There is no such thing as going to the Chumash and looking at the Chumash, saying there's a pasuk that says do something, and we do it based on what it says in the Chumash. Everything that it says in the Chumash has to be processed, has to be filtered through Torah Shebal Peh. Right? The Chachamim who receive the Torah Shebichsav with the Torah Shebal Peh, they are the ones who can interpret for us the Torah Shebichsav and tell us when and how and if, right, the mitzvahs of the Torah Shebichtav should be performed. But we don't go directly back to the Torah Shebichtav. That's the yesod that Moshe understands it. Right? Shehu al yedei masoret haTorah ish mipi ish ad Moshe Rabbeinu. The only Torah that we have is the Torah which has been passed on, masoret ish mipi ish, from Moshe Rabbeinu. That's the Torah that we have. Any break in the masoret is right. So then that mitzvah doesn't have any more masoret. And if that mitzvah doesn't have any masoret of how to do it and when to do it and what the form of the mitzvah is, so then it becomes, how should I say, defunct. Right? Then it becomes a part of the Torah which is not applicable to us anymore. Okay? That's the big chiddush. We don't have a masoret of how to do this. There's no tradition of how this is done. We don't have the ability to start something new on our own, which isn't a continuation of that which we have received from our teachers and our Rabbeim. So it goes together. We can't do it, and we're not obligated to do it. We don't have to start looking for ways to do things which we don't have a masorah about how to do this. He says, and this is similar to tchelas betzitzis, she'af shehu chiyav gomer midiraisa. There's no question that tchelas betzitzis is right. Kiven shemasoret haTorah shebal peh hufseka me'itanu b'inyan zeh. We do not have any tradition of how to fulfill the mitzvah of tchelet. Right? We don't. Right? It was something that didn't exist for hundreds of years. So therefore, we don't have to bring it back to try to figure out how to do it. Right? We do, everybody does. What did your Rebbe do? What did your father do? What your Rebbe, your father is maybe in terms of minhagim, but what did your Rebbe do? What did your Rebbe do? Your Rebbe didn't put on chelas, so don't start putting on chelas. Your Rebbe didn't, right? Our Rabbeim didn't have a smicha, so we don't start something new just because we can figure out how it could be done. We do things because, I know how to build a sukkah because my father built a sukkah, my Rebbe built a sukkah. He taught me how to build a sukkah. I saw sukkahs, right from the previous generation. I know what my tefillin should look like because there's a Masorah what my tefillin should look like. Ish mipi ish from Moshe Rabbeinu. This is what tefillin looked like. That's what I know. I don't have any Masorah about certain things. I don't have a Masorah about, and so therefore we do not have the ability to do this. And he quotes again. I know that there's other opinions, right? But this is, and he quotes, interestingly, we'll see, he quotes the Beis Halevi, right? He quotes the Beis Halevi, right? I remember many years ago. So the yeshiva. Well, we had one of our Shabbatons we did in Sfat, I believe it was. I don't remember exactly, but part of the program, the itinerary for the Sunday, we had a tiyul on Sunday after our Shabbaton, was to visit the tchelas factory, or whatever wherever they make tchelas in someplace, right? So in order to prepare for this, I looked into a little bit into the sugyas, right? into the issues, right? And as he says, it's true for Rabbi Yosef that not to have tchelas. I spoke to Rabbi Moshe Sternbuch at the time when I was living in Harnof, and I asked him, and he said, "No, we don't do tchelas, and we don't do it." And then I spoke to one of the rabbanim who I was in touch with at the time, and he was a very Haredi rabbi, and he pulled out Rabbi Soloveitchik's drushes. I was very surprised that he had Rabbi Soloveitchik's drushes in his library. But yeah, he pulled it out. I mean, I was on the phone with him, and he said, "Sure, just wait a minute." I pulled it out of his library, and Rabbi Soloveitchik himself, following the Brisker tradition, as we'll see from the Beis Halevi, was Rabbi Soloveitchik's grandfather. Right? Followed and said, right, they made this point. We don't do tchelas because we don't have a masoret of how to do tchelas, and we don't do it. And of course, we know that Rabbi Soloveitchik's Talmidim do put on tchelas, so I'm not going to go into the question of, of how that, that the practical issues are there. But Lamaisa, this is certainly an approach which Rav Moshe is also a Talmud of the Brisker Derech. And so this is what he's telling us, is that this is his approach. That we don't do things without a masoret of exactly how it should be done. Okay, and then he goes on. Right, and he goes into a longer description about the tchelas issue as well, because he says on page Reish Lam at the top of the page, right? Mitziat tchelet, the finding of tchelet. So he says, "Ze bemet davar pele." Shebedorot achronim, right? Come Adam Gadol, right? So we're talking about the Radziner Rebbe, right? The Radziner Rebbe was a very big Rebbe in the second part of the 19th century, in the 1800s, who claimed to have discovered the tchelis, the chilazon, the fish or the snail from which you could extract chelek. And there's certain simanim, and he says, I found it. And he went to all the Gedolei Yisrael of his time to ask for their haskama, right? Their approbation, right? Will you will you sign? He wrote a whole book, a whole kuntris on it, and he said, I need haskamas. He's going to listen to me if the Gedolim don't back me up. And he showed them, and he proved to them, etc., etc. Says Moshe, what happened historically? Nobody joined them. Everybody was mishtamet. They tried. They said, no, "Sorry, we're not getting into this. Right? We're not getting involved." It's not so understood. Right? And he was very frustrated. I mean, the man spent much effort, right? Years of effort and discovery and writing, and he was a halachic, genius. So he was able to bring everything in, and he spent, right? And he said, "Areya filim zesrak sofek madua shelo nikach." That's a common argument, right? Even if it's a sofek, because nobody says that if it's not chelas, that it makes your tzitzis puzzle. Right? Maximum you have blue colored tzitzis, which is not chelas. It's not a problem. You can color your tzitzis red or green or purple, whatever way you want to color. There's no halacha of color of tzitzis, right? So even if it's a suffix, why aren't you guys doing it? V'rov Gedolei Yisrael afilu lo nizdakakol le'ashiv l'Torah, supposed to even bother answering him. V'rak Moran Beis Halevi, and this is what I mentioned before. So again, the Beis Halevi, let's just put it into a historical context, right? The Beis Halevi, right, is right. There was a book, a tremendous biography, a wonderful biography about the Beis Halevi. It's called the Beis Halevi. Was the name of the biography was Rishon L'Shoshelet Brisk, right? The originator of the Brisk dynasty. Okay? So we know that his son was Reb Chaim Halevi Soloveitchik, right? That was his son, and then Reb Chaim's son was among others, several sons, but one was the Brisker Rav, Rabbi Yitzchak Zev Soloveitchik, who was the Rav in Brisk until World War II, and then he came to Eretz Yisrael, and he lived in Eretz Yisrael, and he passed away in the end of the 1950s. And then, of course, they have the American branch of who are descended from another son of Reb Chaim Brisker was Reb Moshe Soloveitchik, who was the Rosh Yeshiva in Bayou, and then his position was inherited by Rabbi Yosef Dov. So we have so the Beis Halevi was a very, very important figure in the history of the Achronim. Was one of the Rosh Yeshivas in Volozhin. So anyway, so the Beis Halevi wrote as follows: "V'rak Moran Beis Halevi to'an negdo me'ein dvarim ve'nokan." The Beis Halevi made a similar argument to what we're saying. We Amar shekivan harishonim lo ishtamshu b'tchelet hazu, since the Rishonim didn't use tcheles. Memela afilu im ze posuk mufurish hu lo yosim tcheles. He says even if it was a mufurish posuk that the Radziner Rebbe was right. I'm not going to wear tcheles. Right? Ki ein lanu elarak et hamasoret shel Torah shebal peh ish mipi ish. We only have the masoret of how to apply Torah. You can't You can't skip over the chain of tradition of the Torah shebal peh. V'chivan shemosrei haTorah haya biyodam ladat ma shehu yodea, and since the Mosrei Torah, they should have known, or they could have known what he knew. V'heim b'chol ofen lo asu chaim. Ein anu mechuyavim likanes b'zeh. We don't have to get involved. Right? We just go to the Mosrei Torah. Mosrei Torah, what do you have to tell us? And follow the psak of the halacha of how the tradition was handed down to us. That's how we do things. We don't initiate. We don't start things. We don't make up things. We again, there was a quasi kind of attempt in the early days of Medinat Yisrael, and back in the 50s, by some prominent Rabbanim more associated with the Mizrahi party, who attempted at the time, who thought that they could be mechadish the smicha in Eretz Yisrael, based on the fact that there was an ingathering of the exiles, and there were many Talmidei Chachamim. But of course, that was met by massive opposition by the Gedolei of the Gedolei Ador, and so that also didn't get off the ground. Right? So I'm saying, so it's something which is in the air, but something which let's call it a very conservative position, right, of following just a tradition. Right? So also, today they just people quote psukim, people quote chazals, right? But if it doesn't go through the Chachmei Torah shebal peh, who are in every generation, the Gedolim of every generation, they're the Chachmei Torah shebal peh of our generation. Okay. So that's good. And a similar thing, without getting into a more controversial point, a similar thing is people who go to Har HaBayit. I think that it's against the consensus of the great majority of Gedolei Torah of the past many generations, right? They say, yeah, but they have this and they have that. They can figure things out. They can figure out where exactly where the Makom HaMikdash is, and they can figure out where it's mutter to go, where it's usher to go. We don't have a. This was actually I read it just recently. One of the prominent Rosh Yeshivas of the Hesed Yeshivas, the Negev, someplace I don't remember his name. He wrote against this phenomenon of people going to the Har HaBayit. He says, what happened to the Torah Sheba'al Peh? Right? We only know Torah Sheba'al Peh. Right? We don't figure things out. We don't try to figure out, well, let's skip back 10 generations, 20 generations, and we'll reconstruct the Rambams, and we'll take measurements, and we'll figure out things that nobody ever figured out before. No. Right? We have the klolim of the Torah Sheba'al Peh, and what's mutter, what we have a tradition as mutter is mutter, we have a tradition as aser is aser, and we don't try to play around with those kinds of things. So that's again, there's people who do differ, but this is say a mainstream in terms of Torah Sheba'al Peh, of halacha kind of things, right? And so therefore, yeah. So we don't make these changes. V'yomnam, let's finish up today, right? V'yomnam, hayom, right? Kfar kulam b'tuchim she'oto adag shu matzah ineno dag anachal. He says, first of all, Rabbi Hirshfeld is talking, many years later. I don't know how many years, close to 100 years later. That everybody knows now. Everybody is clear that he was mistaken. The Radziner Rebbe was mistaken, and it's clear, right, that it's been clarified, right, that his fish wasn't the right one. He said, and then there was another one which came in the middle. Rav Herzog, the chief rabbi of Israel, who was also a very qualified chemist, I think, in his secular life. His secular education. He didn't have a secular life. He was a tremendous Talmud Chacham, but part of his education was that he had a different opinion of what was right, and that was also discredited. Right? And so today there's something which is the most popular, and this is what they sell in the stores, and this is what you can buy. Right? There's a whole chain of stores in there. It's Israel called Mishkan Atchelet, right? There's you go buy. You can buy tzitzis and fill in there. You can buy, but their original selling point where they started their business was specializing in chelet, right? So there is a chelet available today. He says, but that the point isn't whether he was right or wrong about the specific creature that he says. Ella, kol mitzvah shebetorah shebichtav fluya b'masoret Torah sheba'al peh. V'chivan she'adavar talui b'mitziut. This is something which depends on mitziut. What is it? It either is or it isn't. V'hamitziut lo avra aleinu al yadei mosrei haTorah. What the fish is, or the snail, or whatever it is right, was not transferred to us by those who were most of the Torah, the transmitters of Torah. Ein ze nogea eleinu. This is not that's not relevant for us. V'chein b'doma yetzel hamari berav. Right? And the same thing going back to the issue of the smicha. Shehu za'ak v'tzavach v'hirish al zed kol ha'olam. He screamed and he wrote letters. Right? And I say I saw a book of the correspondence between him and the other rabbanim, and he wrote letters to the whole world, to the whole Jewish world in Europe and then wherever there were Jewish rabbis and authorities. V'lo shamu, but people didn't listen to him. V'amnam hayu lahem negdo tanot hilchatiot. There were halachic tainas against him. Aval hayu ito gedolei olam mamash. But the gedolei olam were with him on his side. Umarana Beis Yosef atzmo husmach al yada. The Beis Yosef himself got smicha. Ubechozat lo ola adar biyado. Okay, so he says. So what's the thing? So again, so why? So the Beis Yosef, he knew what we know. So, but who decides at the end of the day? Who's going to decide, right? What innovations are going to be accepted or not? And here Moshe tells us a very interesting conclusion. Klal Yisrael kovea. V'tzarich ladat שהפוסק האחרון בדברים אלו זה כלל ישראל. שאף שאינם נביאים בני נביאים הם. As the Gemara says, right, the Gemara says in Pesachim, right, that there was a machlokas about how to carry the knives to shech the korban Pesach if it falls on Shabbos, and the rabbis had a big machlokas. They didn't know exactly what to do, so they said, "Well, let's wait and see what people do." Because it says even if the people are not neviim, b'nei neviim, they have a healthy instinct for what the proper thing is. L'chein, im l'maisa zelot kabel b'chlal Yisrael ein lezeh tokef. If Klal Yisrael didn't accept it, then it has no validity. V'im zeh kein mitkabel, and if it is accepted, that's a sign that it's a good thing. Af kasher ein mesoret. V'atamhu, and Rashi puts it in this way, ki l'chlal Yisrael yesh keva bria. What does a keva mean? Ready? A stomach. Klal Yisrael has a healthy stomach. Right? What does it mean, a healthy stomach? Right? A person has a healthy stomach, so if he eats something bad, he spits it out, he vomits it out, right? Right? His stomach is going to reject it, right? And so Klal Yisrael knows what to accept and what to reject, right? Klal Yisrael knows, has a sense, an inner instinct, what should be accepted and what should be pushed off. Even if there's no clear reason, right? Right? There are things that will be accepted, and he brings an example in the from in the next paragraph of something that was accepted, right? Even though there was no masoret. And until now, he's saying, well, if we have no masoret, we don't accept things, right? But now, look at the example that he brings. V'zeh davar nifla, shebe'oto dor atzmo she'asmicha lo itkabla. The same generation, people, right, Klal Yisrael did not accept this innovation of smicha. Kulam kiblu et harizal pe'echad. He said there was unanimous acceptance of the Kabbalah of the Arizal. He says, and he said, we're not talking about those who were against the Zohar and to the whole concept of Kabbalah. She'elohem kofrin, because those guys, Rabbi Moshe, right, has no use for those. If you don't hold by Kabbalah, you're a kofar. And your place is outside the camp. You're not in the camp. Okay, so right, according to Rabbi Moshe, right, the Zohar is divrei Chazal, right, and we have to relate to it as divrei Chazal with the same, not less gravitas and authority than the Mishnah and the Gemara. Okay? These are divrei Chazal, and the whole Chachmas Kabbalah. And we know that Moshe was a tremendous expert in Kabbalah, right, among his other talents. Right? There's other ideas. Right? Right? Okay. So he says, Ella, mitoch mekabli ator v'shomrei hamasora, kulam kiblu divrei Arizal v'tarasa. He says, you go to right, the Vilna Gaon, right, lived in Lithuania, right? He was totally, accepted the approach of the Arizal to Kabbalah. Right? Even though he said things from the mouth of Eliyahu that nobody had ever heard before. And he wasn't known for a long time. He came from Egypt. But he came from Tzfat. B'choref shnat Hey Shin Lamed Aleph. Okay, so you guys know how to figure out the year. Shin Lamed Aleph, 331 is which year? In the Goyish, you add 1240, right? Like I told you guys once upon a time, 1240 to 331 is 1571, right? That's when he came to Tzfat, right? Ad Hey Av Shin Lamed Beis, and he died in the 5th of Av, a year and a half later, right? In Shin Lamed Beis, Shaz Niftar. V'zeh b'sach hakol shana u'shmona chadashim. The whole Torah of the Rizal was mitgaleh in a period of a year and 8 months. It was accepted without any question. V'roim. We see Shemasha Klal Yisrael mekabel umekarev zetera umasha milo mekablim nidche v'yotzeh chutza. But Klal Yisrael accepts as Torah, and what's not accepted is pushed out and yotzeh chutza. Okay. So Moshe, it's an interesting, just practically, just to have a look at a way of looking at certain things that are happening around us. Right? But again, the Ikar Yesod is that that the primary condition for us is Masorah. Right? 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 To do things right, because right, the Torah Sheba'al Peh is the way we understand what the Torah Shebechtav means. Right? And if we don't have the Torah, again, it's Dover Poshet that just on the most elementary level, without Torah. Right? I always mention the example of a former student of Shapell's who, right, was before he was Jewish even, he wanted to do Jewish things, and he read in the Torah that you're supposed to build a sukkah. And how you build a sukkah? So he put branches over his car, and he slept in his car, and that was his sukkah. Because if you read the Torah, right, shebichtav, so then that's what you get, right? Right? You get branches on your car, right? Right? Again, Baruch Hashem, he's a lot smarter now, and he became Jewish, and he learned the yeshiva, and he's raising a wonderful, beautiful family. But a Jewish, wholesome family. But again, you have to know what you have to know, and we have to always have, have a sense of a connection to our Rabbeim, to the Rabbanim, to the Mosrei HaTorah. The Mosrei HaTorah, they're the ones who know what's good for us. They're the ones who understand. They're the ones who are going to follow us. Okay. Any questions? Any thoughts on these issues? Anybody would like to say something?
Yeah, Rabbi, what about Chodesh and Yaakov? Sort of had a little bit of a revival, maybe, but
Yeah. Again, I mean, first of all, it's I mean, those are things that that were always there. I mean, the poskim always they were always there in the poskim, right? So again, what happened is that for many years, so then people were noheg according to certain kulos. They relied on certain kulos, certain svek and things like that. They relied on certain kulos, and so. But there were always, even in Klai, so there were always a small group of people who were machmir and were very careful not to eat chodesh. And you say you're right; it's a revival, right? Okay, but you don't have to mechadish anything new. I mean, we don't need a. There was never a loss of masoras of what is chodesh. Right? We know exactly what chodesh is. The question is whether you can rely on certain kulas and make assumptions that what you're eating isn't chodesh or not. That's a separate question, right? Or whether there's rely on a certain opinion in the Tanoim that says that there's no chodesh in chutzlar. So there was, so there were people who relied on kulas. So to be machmir in places where people relied on kulas, so then it's not necessarily a break in the Masorah. But then it swings back to and also don't forget the technological advances that we have make it much easier, right, to keep today to keep chodesh because we can always keep our we can keep track of where the grain was when it grew, where it grew, and these are things that are documented. So if I want to keep be makpid, I can be sure to go to the granaries which are documented not to have. So, right. But you're right. It's the different people. Where there's kulas, there's always room to be to go back and be machmer. And machlokas is in halacha. But interesting example. Yeah, Jory.
So I'm wondering, specific on this, the Rambam's position about musmachim.
Mhm.
So, what is his position? Does he share Rav Moshe's position that without a Masorah on how to do it, uh, and the I forget the name of the original.
Yeah, Rav
Uh,
Yaakov Rabin in Tzvat, yeah.
yeah,
So, um, you know, they they clearly didn't. You know, they clearly thought that we could be Machadish, things that we didn't have a Masorah on. Um, but Moshe is more talking about the Lemaisa, right?
yeah,
Whether to look at at the question of as they say in Hebrew, the mivchana totzah. Right? What happened is what's the final result? Right? The final result is that there is a built-in resistance Klal Yisrael has to chidushim, right? Right? And so he said that we have to rely on Klal Yisrael. In other words, there could be people who think that it's really important and really think it's very important, but we have to, at the end of the
and
day.
does that touch on the Geula and how
Well, so
it's not the right time for Geula, or maybe we could if we.
or that's not something that again, as we said earlier, right? Right? We can do things which are mitzvahs anyway, right? Like I said, like the primary example is settling Eretz Israel, right? That we hasten the Geula through settling Eretz Israel, right? But that's not because we're doing something that never happened. Right? There was always a masoret of settling Eretz Israel. There were always Jews coming to Eretz Israel, throughout the centuries. There was always some Jewish presence in Eretz Israel. There were always people, Rabbanim coming, people coming, every generation. The Ramban came and the Balei Tosfos came, and many people came over the course of the century. So those things. But now the question is, well, let's do something new, like making a smicha in order to be Mizari's the Geula. And so here it was a question: is it going to, is this in the category of something which is clearly an okay thing to do, and therefore it should be embraced as being Mizari's the Geula? Or is there some reason to have hesitations about it? In which case, so that we don't have to do it in order to be Mizari's the Geula, because it becomes a questionable practice, right? And so what Moshe is saying is that that result was as Klal Yisrael viewed it with the smicha with a kind of reluctance or hesitancy or skepticism, and did not embrace it. So Mamela, it turns out to be that in retrospect, we see it wasn't something that wasn't the thing to do in order to bring about the Geula. That's what I can help with that. Okay, we'll stop here for today, a little early, but Mirza Hashem, next week we'll start the next chapter, a very interesting chapter, right? Which continues with the classical things that we've been talking about. How, what are the signs of Mashiach, right? So we gotta, right? But I'm just listening to the news. I mean, all of the things that we learned a couple of months ago about, you know, Edom and Paras, United States and Iran, and then there was a machlokas in the Rishonim, who at the end of the day, who's going to win, right? I don't know. They probably were reading the newspapers and they said, we really can't know who's going to win. You know. I mean, again, a couple of months ago, it seemed so preposterous. A tremendous United States and there, Iran I'm not a big expert in the politics, but it seems that they got the United States wrapped around the little finger. They can do whatever they want. And Trump was just going to huff and puff and blow the house down, but it's not going to work. So, Kitzer, so the jury is still out in this great battle between the Paras and Edom. Let's just hope that we don't get caught in the crossfire, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu should bring us a Geula Meheira B'Yameinu. Okay, guys, so Mr. Shem, we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining. Okay, call to.
Thank you.